Hello and welcome to another video. This video is gonna be on curvature combs, CV manipulation, G3 curvature, G2 curvature. I want to demystify the sort of math behind it so that you guys can understand what's happening later down in the video when we're talking about the when we're doing real CV massaging and understanding all those curvature combs and all that. So I want to first talk about, before going into surfaces, I want to get these concepts across using curves. And I did a very quick little algorithm to sort of explain that, right? We have this very simple like spiral curve, right? And I want to sort of talk about the different relationships of a curve, right? So every curve has a domain or from what the start of it to the end of it, right? That a lot of times it's like they're called like the parameter, right? So that's why I have it here as curve parameter. And as I kind of go down, as I kind of go down, and change it, it's basically cutting the curve down to that, right? And so I want to talk about first, like, what's the first form that two lines can sort of like coexist, right? The first one is that they're just touching. That's called G0, and it's called positional. So here I did a little positional, right? So this pink line and this blue line, that's all that they have in common, that they're both reaching the same point, and that's it. And the little bit of relations, like they have a little bit of a perpendicular relationship, just where I put the point. But the more important aspect of this is that the only when two lines have positional, it just means are they touching, are they in the same like space in time, or I'm sorry, in the same like point in space. Then after that, what's the next thing that we could do, right? If we sort of like build it up simpler, right? One is that we're touching, and now it's that we're going the same direction, right? That a lot of times that's called the vector. Like the vector is just basically a direction in space, and then a certain number attached to it. So if I go here and I go tangent, see now this pink line, and then if I move it down, that pink line's relationship with that blue line is just it's a tangent relationship. It's just that once it hits that point, it looks at where that curve is going, and it follows that direction, and that's tangent. That's as simple as it gets. And then so what's the next point of that, right? Because now all we're doing is following the direction, right? Now we want to follow the curvature, right? So if I change this to curvature, you see it's very it's following, it's looking here, and if I turn on my curvature radius, right, it's looking here, and then it's making sure that this curve and this curve where they meet is the same radius, right? And so if I actually close up this curve, see, that's what curvature is. And then when you see the curvature combs, right, let me turn those on. Let me get we'll go a little bit closer to here, and then we'll extend this. We'll move this back here. Right. So if you see, whenever you see curvature combs, a lot of people don't understand what they're actually telling you. They just kind of like, it's almost they base their workflow on that graph, but they don't really know what's going on. So if you see here, the closer it is to they're sort of like inversed. So the closer it is to the bigger the radius is, the closer it's going to be to the curve. And so as we move down the curve, right, and we add more volume, see here you could really see the noticeable difference on how the distance between the curvature comb and the actual curve is getting higher the smaller this radius is getting, right? And that's what you'll see, that those numbers here, and you're like, well, what those numbers mean? It means the radius, right? So let me extend that out again so you can see. See, all that's all that G2 is. The second, once it breaks, all it cares about is that it's living in the same planet. I use that a lot. Like I'm like, you know, we want to make sure that the surfaces are all on the same planet. It's kind of another way of saying that there are curvature with themselves, right? And then a lot of times you hear people talk about in class A, you know, especially very high level refinement, they even start going another step up, right, into G3. And G3, basically how you can think of it, if you see how as we go down the line, this radius is changing, right? So the G3, what it actually means mathematically speaking, is that where they don't only have the radius of the curve, but also the rate of change, as in like how much smaller it's getting as it goes along space, right? So if I go into G3 curvature, that is when it's a more that's when it's completely, and I turn on the curvature combs, you know, that is where it really you know, if you look here where they separate, and even if I go like further back, you know, like it's all in relation, you know, and it's kind of like, it's sort of like looking here, and like, you know, where this is like disconnected, and it kind of goes, it looks at the rate of change, and it's kind of like, okay, so from here it was at this radius, and here, and then so it's slowly getting smaller. Is it slowly getting smaller here too? Yeah. And see, and that is what the G3 curvature really means. You know, it basically means that it's not only following the radius, but it's also following the change of radius, and that's where you get a lot of really smooth like surfacing. And in the next part, we're gonna basically, now that we kind of have like this base started, we're gonna go through those concepts again, but now using curves and surfaces and Alias, and talk about how the different degrees change it, so that we could eventually get to CV massaging and really do some high level stuff. But before we do that, I want to make sure that you know, this idea is cemented on you. And another way I teach that is what I call like the basketball with the baby wipes. And that let me show you that file. Okay, so here is my little like basketball analogy, right? You can think of surfaces as like baby wipes, and then a curvature as basically like the basketball, right? If you put them against the basketball, and this is what I'm gonna do like digitally, right? Now they're all living in that basketball's like curvature, in that planet, you know. And so if I isolate this, and you know, check the curvature, right? They have curvature with themselves. You know, they're all like living in this basketball's radius basically. And and then and then this is a very simple example, right? In the sense of you know, they're all like lined up with themselves, and it's and you know, I'm gonna later talk about just like, you know, massaging these to get them in the right spot and all that. But I wanted to kind of stress the fact that they don't have to be in line with themselves, right? They could also be completely angled, right? Something like this. You know, if I turn on the basketball again, you know, if you know, if you cut up the pieces and then you put them on you know, next to each other, but you could still just put them down on the basket. You know, when you do that, it's gonna be the same thing. You know, they're still gonna be able to you know, they're still gonna be. It doesn't matter what the you know, it doesn't matter how, like that. Yeah, I kind of wanted to sort of show this example to kind of showcase that it's not so much important in terms of like the how they're all lined up with each other, the CVs, but it's more important that that surface is living in that planet, right? So even if it's not you know, because these are still to a certain level, they're also still like, you know, every point is like touching each point, right? But even if you have something like this, some like a trin surface, right? You know, some like a surface like this and a surface like that, right? With a little cut, like, you know, it still kind of follows the same rule. If I line it, it's still, you know, they still have the same, they're still living in the same place. And then when I analyze, even though their degrees are completely, I mean, are, you know, they're not even like touching themselves, you know, they're all just kind of, they're just two surfaces living in the same, you know, basket, basically. They're still, you know, curvature with themselves, and you know, and they're still in relationship with themselves, right? And so that's kind of a big an important concept to understand. That's what curvature is. And it also, just to kind of we're going to talk a little bit more, we're going to talk more in depth right now when we talk about like alignment and stuff, because if I isolate this thing, right, or I'll isolate this one, uh with curvature, you only need, you know, because this row is telling this surface the direction, right? And if like for example, if I just do like a nonlinear extend, right, that would be a tangent extension, right? But that tangent extension wouldn't live anymore in that basketball, right? That's why it's always important to keep the curvature as much as you can, you know, as opposed to, I always aim for curvature with like everything, you know, even if it's like kind of like it's tiny. Like the more you just aim for curvature, the better your life is going to be when we're talking about, you know, different forms touching and you know, relating with themselves. But the first line, you know, that's all tangent, right? But if and then the second line, that's what gives us the radius, the curvature. So all of these other lines, like all of these, if I kind of get my, if I pick this hole and I move it up, and this one, and I move it up, and this one I move it up, it's like kind of like peeling away. It's like peeling away the you know, the baby wipe. You know, it's like it's still curvature here, but now I'm grabbing this and I'm peeling it away. And if I kind of do this and, you know, kind of like show you guys the, like here it's still making sense, but you know, once I start, you know, changing it to another curvature, then that's when it's already like, it already accomplished its goal of like, you know, relating to this surface. And then after that, you know, it could relate to any other surface, or stuff like that. But basically, this is how I kind of try to teach people on how to imagine what is curvature, you know, why it's important to have everything, you know, try to like live in the same area, have the same sort of like, you know, general curvature, because it makes like your life a lot easier. So now that we kind of got these like subjects out of the way, now we'll go more into just CV manipulation, and, you know, how it's basically, I'm basically going to do what the alignment tool do, but by hand. And then I'm also going to show you how we could go even higher into things like, you know, G3 curvature, so we could have the curvature cones and all that. But before I got to that, I wanted to just basically explain this so we could really understand, you know, what we're trying to accomplish, and then what the next level is, and then that way we have a solid base for everything. Okay, so the first thing we want to kind of go through is the curvature comb inside of Alias, right? So I'm just going to have this simple curve, and I'm going to add a little more degrees, or just one, and I'll push it up like that. And here under locator, you could see the curvature comb tool here. I have it in my shelf here, and it's here. And if you want that, it's in the, you could download the preference set in my website, right? So when I select this and I click here, right, these are the same numbers that we were seeing earlier with my algorithm, right? And if I pick the CV and just move it around, we can kind of start seeing, right, how that's changing the character of the curve, right? And if I kind of like leave it here, right, and in this sort of example, it's very easy to see that it's flatter here, right? It's closer, and then this is where it turns, right? And one of the things that I want to kind of, another aspect of like the curvature comb tool that I want to kind of go over is that if you see here, if I kind of like bend it to like some extreme like that, like this, you see how it's like way like out in space. It's because when we initiated the tool, it had this sort of curvature, so it kind of like it's like normalizes those numbers so that it makes sense to the curve you're trying to analyze. Because as you know, what the radius is, it could be very tiny and it could be super huge. So anytime you use that tool, it kind of like tries to find one that has the best, like, average for what you're trying to do, right? So like, for example, just kind of like show you guys how that can kind of like affect you. If like, let's say I have this, right, and then I'm just gonna do a quick extend like this, right? This is a curvature extend. um if I I'm gonna grab this and scale this one down, right, like that, right? So if I analyze the curvature comb like this, I'm sorry, that's the wrong tool here, like this and this. See, everything is fine, right? But let's say that for some reason I was looking at this one, and then I click on this one, right? And then I'm like kind of moving stuff around, and then I activate my tool again, and then I click on this one. See, you might kind of get the impression that there's something wrong here, or the curvature is wrong, but that's not the case. The thing that it's important to understand that when you activate the curvature tool, you activate all the curves that you're going to analyze with it at the same time, or else you might get like kind of these little problems where you're like, wait, what's going on and stuff like that, right? Because then once I like make them like that, see, it kind of takes this curve's like radius and kind of bases it off that. And like, even if I kind of just change the like from this one to this one, right, like this, see, even that scale is different, right? So let me so you guys kind of just see it in action, right? So if I go here, if I do this one first and then this, whoops, if I do this one first and then this one, right? And then here I'm gonna do the same thing, the same tool, the same curves with the same measurements, but I'm gonna select this one first and then this one. You see, it's the same curve, except that the scaling, the proportional scaling of it is different, right? And then actually, when you're activating the tool, if you actually want to change that, if you press the left mouse button, you could change it. You could that scale is like changeable, and then if you press the middle mouse button, you get more samples, what they're called, right? Another thing that you have to like understand about the curvature comb tool is there's also, because we're in 3D space now, there's also another like aspect of it, right? Let me delete this and turn this on again. This is also telling you where it's almost like the normal direction of the curve, right? So if I kind of do this and move it like that, see, the curvature comb is basically just in line with that this curve's like sort of like plane in space, right? So but a lot of times when you're analyzing that, you'll see like a lot of twisting, and that's basically what it's telling you, is that there's a torsion in the curve, right? If I only have 1 degree, it's sort of impossible to make anything twist, right? Because it's only 3 like sort of points, so there's no other like point to like make it go the other way. So if I add just a little more degrees, right, and then I move this out like this, you see now this curve is telling me how this curve is twisting, right? So that's why once you kind of start seeing that, you start to kind of understand, once you're actually doing a design, what's actually happening and why it's kind of turning like that. So if you see a lot of like wiggling back and forth, it usually means that they're kind of like they're just going back and forth from each other a lot. So you have to kind of try to planarize them, and there's different like tools and stuff like that. But for right now, I just want to teach you guys what like certain aspects of this tool. And now that we kind of got that out of the way, I wanna talk a little bit about like curvature and tangent and all that. And we're still gonna keep it in curves, because it's a lot easier to kind of explain these concepts. Okay, so now we're gonna go over basically degrees and how they affect tangency and how they affect alignment and all that, right? So Right now, all I have is a curve, and I'm gonna add another curve here. And obviously, again, this is just positional. We're just touching. In fact, also I could also you know, if I don't want to like snap it, I could also just use the alignment tools, which I have up here in my align tools here, and then just select here and here, right? And then so now that's a positional, right? And I can move it across the line because, you know, it's asking, you know, all I told it, it's like, hey, I want this curve to touch this curve, and it doesn't have to be the end. It just, you know, it's wherever. And then see here, we have all those G zeros, right? All the different ones. And I have them, you know, so this is all the same tool. It's just different. The settings are different, right? So that because sometimes I want positional, sometimes I want a tangent and all that, right? So I'm gonna delete the history, and then I'm gonna go tangent, right? So now we can kind of, you know, if I grab this CV and move it, right? It's a pretty easy sort of like concept to understand, right? It's following the direction of that curve, right? So now we actually want to start adding a curvature to this tool, right? We actually want to give it a radius. If it's a straight line, there's nothing much we could do with that, right? So let's add more degrees. We're going to slowly add more degrees. And then if you see here, if I move this one, nothing's happening here because I'm only asking this for its tangency. And also this one, since this also only has one degree, it can only be flat, right? So we need to give it more math. And so first, I'm like just I real quick, I just deleted the history, and then I'm gonna add more CVs there, right? And then now I'm gonna show you guys how, like, if I go here to curvature align, and I go here and here, you see it's if I now it found the radius, right? And so if I move this down, right, I'm making it flatter, so it's pushing this one out, making it flatter, right? And then if I move this and then the tangency here, right? If I move this up, see, it starts changing the whole like direction of that curve, right? This is going to be very important later once we do the CV massaging. And another like sort of important aspect to kind of like think about is that as if I can always query edit this, right? And then I can always like move it back, right? I can move this back too, like that, right? And the reason why I kind of want to move these back like this is there it's always important to try to be conscious of what you're aligning to, because, you know, if I move this one back, right? If I move back like that, it's changing this one, right? And so that's a fairly easy. But if I sort of like flip it around and then I make this one be in line with this one, the same thing is happening here, except that I'm doing the smaller move here is affecting this a lot more, right? So it's like kind of like I'm doing a little bit of change, and that little bit of change is causing a bigger change here. And that's why, even though I definitely in my own workflow, I kind of go back and forth because I have very fine control over this. It's always important to remember to try to go from the bigger to the smaller, right? And if I go maybe something, let me delete the history, and then I'll put the curvature on this side, right? And let me do like something like this, right? And then so this I kind of want to show you guys because it's like curvature. Remember, it's only up to the basically third degree, right? First degree, second degree, third degree. Or I guess this would be the first degree, but basically the third point. And so if you in sort of simple situations like this, then, you know, it's fine. But we're always gonna have, you know, more control over that, right? Because we want to, you know, we don't want, like here we might want to you know, land at a certain spot, right? So let me I'm gonna delete the history here, I'm gonna extend it, and I'm gonna put more degrees, right? And then I'm just gonna snap this, or like basically make it positional to this, right? So now when I do the alignment tool, see, it's only affecting these, right? And I could always move them around with the arrows like that, right? To change the distribution. And then if I move this one around, right? If I move this one around, it's gonna move this around, right? See, and remember, we're doing the same thing. The flatter I make it, the flatter this tries to get. The rounder I make this, the rounder this is trying to get, right? And then, but obviously, a lot of times you don't want to, you know, be changing where this is connected, and then that's going to affect that, right? So I'm gonna add more degrees here too. And so now when I move this, it doesn't affect it, right? So here is where I can start moving this CV around to help me here, right? And then now if I implement more my curvature combs, right, something like this and like this, right here is where I can start kind of moving these around to kind of help me have a smoother transition, right? So if I kind of if moving this, like if it's here, you know, it's getting here, and then the radius isn't that this wouldn't be G3, right? It isn't like sort of like going with the flow. So if I move this closer, I'm kind of like I'm kind of like changing the character of this line so that when it gets to that point, it has a more a better like transition, and that has more of like a G3 transition, right? So the whole concept of this little exercise was to understand how, you know, how this works, right? Tangency is these two, and then curvature is, remember, the planet they live on, and it really depends on, you know, on this CV, right? So if I move it in, and we move it out, right? And if you notice how I'm moving these with that arrow, I'm moving this with the Control CV tool, and that's an extremely important tool that we're about to go over in the next section. So that once we actually try to basically use these same concepts in surfacing, that we have fine control over the surface. So so let's get into that, and then we're slowly getting into actually massaging these things. Okay. So now to learn how to CV massage, we need to know how to actually move them with a lot of precision and control, right? Because if I just have this normal plane and it's off the XYZ, if I'm just like moving it with my, you know, typical like just workflow of you know, just selecting them and moving them using the different axes in the world, that's fine in these sorts of situations where you're just dealing with a floor that's oriented to the, you know, world, but that's not going to be the case like ever. Like most of the time, the you know, the surface is going to be oriented in a very awkward position. Well, obviously, you know, like you know, anywhere in space. So, but we still need to figure out how to change this around with a lot of control, right? Because if I just kind of use typical like let's say I wanted to add more crown this way, if I kind of like, oh, okay, well then I'm just gonna move this up like that, and it's like, okay, well I already I changed the distribution really weird. Okay, so what if I go up from here and I move it over here? Like it's like there's no control there, right? So what we have to do is we have to use the transform CV tool. That tool is here, and when you click on it, I'm gonna hide the grid. When you click on it, and you press spacebar, you see you get all of these different options. I know it could be a little bit like overwhelming, but we'll slowly kind of go through them, right? Because honestly, the only ones you need to worry or you need to sort of like learn about is the slide one, and then the one based off its normal. So because I always have like a philosophy of anytime you move any CV around, you always want it to have it based off the surface that it's living in, right? So if I use the slide tool, right, and I click on a CV, it's giving me all of these arrows, and now I can slide this to however I want. And then with the normal tool, if I go here, the normal is basically, you could think of it as like a vector, like a direction, like perpendicular to the overall surface, right? So like the surface is lined up like that, and if I hit it against the normal, you see it does that. So that way, like let's say I wanted to grab all of these, and I wanted to add crown this way, and I still wanted everything else to be kind of like, you know, basically as clean as I can. If I do the transform CV, See now this is a very clean like crown, right? And with my slide tool, if I go here and then I change it to slide like that, you know, I can, like, for example, for some reason, like let's say I needed to move this out like this, since it's kind of, it's using this as a direction, it makes it so it's not changing at all the curvature of this. It's not adding random like distortions, right? I'm doing everything extremely controlled, and that's basically the main ways I do a lot of transformations in with my or CV massaging. So the last thing I want to talk about is fall off, because it's actually something that I most recently implemented, and it's actually just when I developed this video, because I was kind of taking a look around at the tool and seeing if I could improve my own workflow, right? So typically in my own, you know, if you guys ever use my preference set, all my transform CVs are here. And then there, if you press Z, this one activates. Shift C, it's the next one, and then Control Shift C does this one. But before, I used to just basically, like, I'll grab these, and my Shift C was based off the normal. And I would kind of like, I would do something, let me add a little more degree so you guys can really see what's going on. I would probably do something like this, right? And then I'd be like, okay, I want to move this one a little more, and kind of maybe add a little more like that, right? But I can kind of make it so that the tool does that automatically. And that's called fall off, and or proportional fall off. So if I right now it's selected to this tool, right? And to change it, it's up here, and then here, you see, if you click on it, now you have this little menu that says fall off, and then when you select any of them, right? You can choose what you want, right? And if you see here right now, it's set at 0. So if I activate my tool, nothing's really happening. It's sort of kind of like how it was set up before. And how I have my color set up, I know that the blue is the U lines, right? And so here's the U and the V, because every surface has two directions, U and V. And so if I change this fall off, you see there's like these little logos right here. If I change it to maybe somewhere like around like 1, see, now it's doing all that automatically. And then I can move this around like that, right? And if for some reason, like you see how there's no fall off on this direction, that's on purpose, right? But if I wanted that to happen, I could always, you know, I could always implement that. And then and then that way, you know, if for some reason I wanted both like this to just be the peak of the movement, we could do that. But if I only wanted to kind of affect one direction, I just turn off the fall off. And now I can use this tool like that. And that's an extremely powerful way of like making sure that the change is very gradual and is very nice. And it's something that I will basically implement to my own preference set and update on my website. So now that we have this long lesson of the Transform CV tool, I know it might be a little bit boring, but it's what actually makes everything work. You know, that is the main tool I use, and that's how you really get these very clean surfaces. And then it's also how you find your own alignment. And so now we're going to go through a couple of exercises to kind of show you guys, you know, the different ways we could use this to model and CV massage. Okay, so now let's kind of put all this stuff we learned in practice, right? Like, let's pretend that we're sort of doing like this hood, and then we have this like bone line, you know, going through it. So obviously the first like thing, the easiest thing to do is just basically run a fillet through it. Let me change the color. So once I activate the tool, I'm gonna select the first one and then the second one. And to me, I got it hotkeyed up to my 3, and then it's up here in my shelves. And once I press enter, see, now we have a nice little like fillet going through it, right? And this 99.99% of the time is definitely like acceptable in the sense of in the design process, right? Because I actually kind of want to make a point here in because even though we're talking about G3 curvature, to me, the difference is extremely difficult for anybody to ever notice, especially when stuff gets milled out. You know, but it's important towards the end when everything is frozen, and then now you could kind of invest the manpower in making these perfect. But if you're just kind of doing regular design work and you know there's going to be a lot of changes, it's always beneficial to keep everything just like this, you know, a hard edge and you know, just kind of not do this like hyper you know, a highlight control. But now let's say that there are no more movements, and now we just want to make this as clean as possible, right? And so here most of the time people will be like, yep, that's perfect, right? But that's not really the case. If I go into my curvature comb here, right, and we go like this, and like this, right? And then I'll add more, and then I'll change the scale with my left click, right? So now from what we learned is that right, we get here, it's definitely finding the same curvature, and then obviously here's the chart, where it turns the most, so it's here in the middle, and then it gets back to this curvature, right? So even though that's the clean curvature line and sort of relationship, we could kind of go the next step, right? So I'm just gonna control copy and paste, and then I'm gonna move this over here. And see, a lot of times, even in my streams, I had people ask like, oh, I thought if it isn't theoretical, it isn't class A, which I thought was really funny to like sort of like hear, because most of the time, once it gets to this point, what happens is people will basically push this surface back. So here, just to kind of do it quickly, I'm gonna do a trim convert of this surface, right, before it's like this. And I'm gonna trim convert it. So now, let me delete this. So now this surface is actually, like now it's this, right? It's like its own little surface, and this is the edge that it meets. It's no longer like this one where it meets like the theoretical and it's trimmed out. This is just the edge. And the same thing, I'm gonna do that here too, right? Like that, and then I'll get rid of the old one, right? And then I have this old fillet, and the relationship has changed a little bit because of the changes I did. So I'm just gonna duplicate these edges because they're already there, right? To grab them, and then delete. And I'm gonna use my square tool to make a square right there, right? And since these are edge to edge now, we can make them give them less degrees, so that they correspond with the surfaces, right? And we're gonna make obviously 3, it's gonna be curvature, and then 1 is gonna be curvature, right? And since they're very in line with each other, I'm also gonna check mark this collinear option, right? This is 3, and then this is 1, which really didn't make any changes at all because they're already so like, you know, aligned with each other. So now that I have that, right, if I put curvature comb here, and here, right? One, I want the edges, these curves, because they're kind of all like related. I want them to have history with the alignment. So I'm just gonna quickly go curvature, align, and grab this and align it to this, and grab this and align it to that. So that way, if I make any changes to those surfaces, it'll be reflected in these curves that I use to make this square, right? And so now all I'm gonna do is grab this again, and just to kind of like just focus on this, and get the curvature again, like this and like this, right? And with my left, I'm changing the scale, and then with this, I'm putting more samples, right? All I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a little more math here, because I want to push these inboard like this to give this is called like lead in. Like I'm kind of like leading in the surface into this fillet. So I don't want to move so much here. So I'll add a little more a little, not there, I'll add a little more degrees this way, right? And then I'll select this whole hole here, and then using my transform CV tool, right? I'm gonna click Z to get this arrow, and I'm gonna not the inside one, but the outside one, this one. I'm gonna click it, and then I'm gonna push it forward. And if you see how, like, if you pay attention here, oh whoops, I clicked the wrong one. If you pay attention here, you can see how the closer I get it, the more I'm finding that G3 curvature, right? So now let's do the same thing, but on the other end. So I'll get these, I'll isolate it, and then we'll do that again here and here, right? We'll up the scale a little bit. And then now I'm gonna grab this, right? And the same thing, I'm gonna press Z, to activate my transform CV. And then I also always recommend, to have the different options set up here and hotkeyd up, so that you don't actually have to, once you have this set up, you don't actually really have to touch it much, right? Because I'm always pressing Z, Shift Z, to change up what I'm doing, right? So again, I'm gonna make sure that I'm touching the arrow that's in the not directly connected to the fillet, but under on the other side, like this one. And now I guess I kind of already got it like that, right? So now if I analyze everything, yeah, I might want a little more here, but at this point, it's already very, very clean, right? So now let's kind of sort of analyze the differences here, right? When especially when we compare it to this, obviously it's very difficult to even see the difference. But once you really do some high level analysis, for example with the zebra stripes, right? If see, because right now if I show you guys with the wireframe, right where the fillet sort of where the surfaces meet, there's an obvious a switch here, right? That's when it kind of goes that way. But if you look at this, now it has a more gradual. So let me if I take out the lines, right? And even if I go here to the tolerance, and I'm gonna make it higher so we could see basically more details. I'm gonna go 001 like that. See, I want you guys to pay attention to here. Right here, I could tell and here, right, and here. I could tell that the curve or the surface changes here. That's where that's where the reflections are going. That's what it's telling me. When I go here, that there's a change here, but you're not exactly sure, where one surface starts and the other ends, right? And so this is this very, very high level, CV massaging and adding lead in to kind of make the reflections or the transitions very, very smooth and basically as smooth as you can get them. And then even if we analyze it with other stuff, with the curvature analysis, right? So here you could really see where the difference is at, right? This is definitely you could tell the right here is where the surface touches the other surface, but then here there's more of it's more gradual. And then that is when you kind of take that approach with body sides and big surfaces like that, it makes everything a lot cleaner and a lot more basically more beautiful. It kind of that's when the lights really start reflecting and kind of playing with the surfaces, and you can't really tell what starts and what ends, but all you're seeing is this beautiful reflections kind of like going everywhere. Obviously, that's kind of a little bit of a simple sort of version. And also just right like just to kind of finish off this little quick tutorial, this is like a very common method of doing that, right? Like what I did is I kind of like moved it back, and then I got this CV and this hole, and I moved it forward, right? But if I go here to my fillet tool, if you see over here, there's other ways to find G3 curvature without actually having to do that. So here I could go here and go into G3 curvature, right? And then once I press enter, now this one is gonna have G3 curvature, but it's not gonna be as like clean as this one, right? So if we you know, once we did that, let's see, let's kind of like compare, right? So see, technically this is you know, what the fillet tool made. This is like sort of G3, but it's not as like clean as this one. You know, this one is actually the, you know, this surface is actually has some lead in, and it's like moving it across, right? Another way of getting G3 and also you're adding a lot more degrees to this whole situation, right? So now this one has 7, and then this one, you know, I'm getting a cleaner result, and I have way less geometry to you know, work with. So and so another way of doing that too is almost kind of like what we did, but let me undo that, and instead of that, I'm gonna extend this back. It's kind of, oh whoops, let me delete the history. I'm gonna extend this back like this, and extend this back like this, and then with my freeform blend, see here, there's actually also G3 here and here, right? So we go like that and like that, right? And then that is another probably go a little more that way, a little more. So that's another like sort of quick way to get a G3 curvature. But the more important, like sort of like in terms of like this whole lesson, was more about you know, doing this sort of movements, you know, to kind of make your life easier. And that's one way of basically getting better curvature. And now we're gonna do more alignment stuff, and you know, how to, because sometimes your alignment tools don't work, and especially in this situation it's very easy, but there'll be other situations where you need to kind of do a lot of hand, like, you know, movements to get the result you want. So in one of my last streams, I was developing the front end of one of my Patreon's cars, and I was sort of showing him how I use CV manipulation here to you know, basically control all this aspect of the car. So now that we kind of went through all that, I kind of want to take these 3 surfaces and continue that, you know, refine it even more, and also just kind of reiterate some of the like lessons we learned, right? So let me I think the only one I'm missing is this wheel well, and yeah, okay. So this is the surface that we ended up with after I untrimmed them, right? And they look fairly good for, you know, for what's happening right now, you know, for like the process. This is just a quick, this was like a quick like sort of model, right? But now first let's kind of see the curvature combs, right? Like this. See, they're not like, you know, there's no you know, they're not G3 curvature, and they are you know, they're actually kind of twisting a little bit, you know, and sort of the quickest way to like planarize something like this is, or at least how I do it, is I put a curve here and I put a curve here, and then I try to put a curve like where it's like almost like the apex of the turn, right? So like somewhere around here. And then I rail that and I stretch it out. And so this kind of shows me exactly, because we weren't that far off in terms of like line control, but we could do a little better, and especially since it's kind of like this giant like area, right? So the first thing I'm gonna do is basically I'm gonna project align this edge to this new surface that I just created, right? So I'm gonna use my project align tool here, and then I'm gonna, in terms of the vector, I'm gonna use you could do like the view. But since I'm doing a bunch and it's fairly close to the y-axis, I'm just gonna use the y vector, and then I'm gonna go like that. See? And then here, and go like that. And then here, and go like that. So now let me put this in its own layer and assign it and get it out of there. Now, let me delete the history. Now, if I analyze the curves, now this surface is this curve is planar. It's like it now only has one direction, and now I kind of I want to change kind of like what we did before, right? So first I'm gonna grab I the first I would actually basically duplicate these edges like that, right? Oh, whoops. Get the, oh my lord, sorry. Get these curves like this, right? And then I'll go back to I'll get my curvature tool again, right? And since they're all the right direction, we're gonna kind of do the same thing we did last time. One, I don't want the tool, like I gotta remember to take that out because I don't really need to see the minimum radiuses, right? So go like that, and like that, right? And this one doesn't have curvature. Uh it's just it's just a curve that I duplicated, right? And then now, kind of when I started isolating like that, it seems like it would make more sense if I move this out like that, and then I align. Then I realign this curve to this like this. And then obviously balance it out a little bit, right? Like that. And then here, the same thing. I'm going to line it like that and then balance it out, right? So now I can kind of use the same approach that we did last time, right? I can get this and then press my Z and then move it based off this arrow, right? And I don't like this like infliction. So I also don't. I feel like this is too many vertices for such a simple line. We can even probably go down to 3. And so now now we'll do that again. We'll push this out like that, right? Like that. And same thing here. First, I wanna give it more volume, right? So I'm kind of like doing it off the normal, but since it's a curve, it's kind of basing it off this. I'm gonna move that out. And then using the slide again, move that like that, right? Oops. Like that. And then this one, do a little more, right? And we might want to even, well, I think that's fine right now. Okay, so now I'm gonna delete the history and then go back and keep and basically do what we did with the, and I think which is this a random curve? Oh yeah, that's the old curve that we use to find the planarization, right? Okay, so now I have those changes, and I'm gonna use that to change this surface, right? So I'll just kind of redo the square by doing n like that, right? And then this one too, and then delete the rest, and then use that new curve that we made, and make sure that it is based off that, like that. And we're just gonna do a quick square right here. Right, and then I think based on my curves, I don't need, and this is only gonna be 3, and then this would only be 4, right? Then, okay, so now we got this. Oh no, now I wanna grab this curve, and we're gonna move this surface back like this, and align it to that curve that we created, right? And since the difference is a bit like, we could do a couple things here, right? We could kind of just grab it like this, and then you know, kind of like clean it up a little bit. I could probably just do it like that. Or if we want to do very clean, we could just kind of like, you know, kind of do what we did on the last one, right? Just to kind of duplicate those and edges, and actually you don't even have to duplicate the edges. You could kind of use the same because a lot of times, like, see how here it's kind of like weird. I'll just basically, now that this is already aligned to that new one, I'll grab it and go, and then I'll just kind of, using its own square, I will make another square, and then I'll make sure that that everything's like, you know, the same like dimensions, right? Or in terms of like the degrees and stuff. So now I could delete the old one that had a bunch of like different movements and stuff like that. This one's a little more balanced. Right? And now I have this, I have this, I have this, and I have this, right? And now I can kind of just go like that, like that, like that, and like that. And then for this one, we're gonna go 3. No, here it's gonna be 6, and then here it's gonna be 3, right? And then we want 1 to be curvature, and then we want 3 to be curvature. All right. So here is where we can really start to see, you know, and then the other part too is in this one, I want it to be collinear, right? Because like I want this line to be in relation to this line, right? So I'm gonna go here 1, and then collinear, right? And then but on this one, we're actually just gonna keep it. We're not gonna do collinear because if you see, it wouldn't make sense, right? See how this is like that and that's that way. So if I kind of like, just to show you guys, like that, see that's where collinear wouldn't make sense, right? So now we have this sort of a little bit of a mission, right? So now I could kind of like, knowing what we know before, we can kind of use this to our advantage, right? We can, for example, this you know, obviously this is like way too far out, right? So I'm gonna grab this CV like that, this one, and then I'm gonna delete the history of the square, and then using my slider, I'm gonna move it closer here, right? Because I only need to move it off that direction. And what I don't understand, if this is if one is collinear, why isn't it completely straight? Because it's supposed to be. But another way sort of like to force that to happen is you go to you make your line tool, and then you add it like that. So now these are perfectly in line with each other. And then now, so like exactly what we were going through before, right? we can kind of like see the distribution and then see the layout of this and start doing some massaging, right? So first, I think this point wants to be closer to here, right? So I'm gonna grab this CV, and then using my arrows, I'm gonna move it this way. That probably I went too much, right? Like that. And then pressing Shift Z, I'm gonna based off the normal now, I'm gonna lift it up so that it has more volume. It kind of like goes higher up, right? And then I'm gonna do the same here. I'm gonna grab this CV. All right, this is like CV massaging, right? Because now I know this, and then also, I can always grab the history of this, and then I can move these around like that, right? To balance everything out. Like this, right? This probably has a little more this, and you could honestly in that stream I was doing this for like way too long, like I think, or in the sense of like, I mean, I always kind of get lost in this, but I'm trying not to take up too much of you guys' time. See, like that. See now, and here I can kind of see how it's generally flatter here, and then here it gets a lot more curvature. And since this is a 6-degree surface, these are kind of free to go. Yeah, I mean, free to do anything, right? Because this is curvature, and then this is curvature, this is tangent, compared to this one. And then this, I could kind of do whatever I want with it. So the first thing I want to do is basically just make sure that it's balanced, right? That it looks like it belongs with the rest of them. So probably a little higher up, and then, or maybe even higher down, and then further in. And then this one, I'm also going to go a little down and a little further in, like that, like that. And then this, oh, instead of actually moving that, right? Because I'm going to move it through here, because I know that if I move this out here like that, it's gonna do that, right? Like that. And then like that, we're gonna go in like that. And then from the top, I can kind of tell that this is supposed to be more closer like that, and this a little more closer like that, right? So now we got these, and with these, I'm actually gonna kind of I kind of want to control this, and then have these like be the then I'll start like worrying about the alignment here. So I'm gonna hide the delete the history, and then using my CV tools again, I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna do that. And since I'm moving them based off their own edges, then even though we're making movements, we're not completely destroying everything. We're still like, it's still because it's not random, we still have like a chance to almost like keep having curvature and tangency, right? So right now I'm just kind of like distribute them a little cleaner, right? Like that and like that, right? So now, I don't want to do any crazy, well, it's already kind of like basically set. And so I don't want to use any tools that will like alignment or anything like that will really make this like, move all that around. So I'm just gonna first I'm gonna use this to kind of do the checks, right? The check alignments. Here I'm gonna do the tangent check first, right? And so like exactly how we learned last time, it means that this is off. Like when this is how you kind of read these sorts of curves, right? This is a tangency check, and then you see here, this is going one direction, and then this one is going the other direction. So it's basically telling me I need you to move this out, and probably this one in, or this one further in, right? So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move this one out to fix this. So I'm gonna base it off the normal, and there. See how it was very subtle. And if that was too subtle, I could kind of go Shift C, Control Shift C, and then that's 1,000. So we could go even slower, right? And let me make sure that it's off the normal. And see, as I'm barely even moving them, and it makes like, and this is basically what CV massaging is. Then I am gonna, the more important thing about this whole situation is that it's landing on this thing, right? So now I'm gonna actually grab my alignment tool and make sure that it's in partial. And then I'm gonna grab this, and I'll make sure that it's positional minimum, right? And then doing those changes, you know, now this kind of, now this gave me a problem here with the tangency, and it's saying it's here, right? But I can't move this out because this one is sort of like trapped, you know, like I don't want to say trapped, but it's more like this is, you know, this is where it really want, you know, like that's one of the important, like, you know, intersection points. So instead of moving this one, and I can't move this one either, I'm gonna move this one, all right? Because it's the tangent, and actually I could probably move this one to help me out too. So I'm gonna do that and then push this in like that. See, oh, that was too much. See, like that. Then let me do like that and then and then here, again, I'm gonna go Control Shift C and then off the normal. So you see how when and this is a good example of how I could use the different forms, right? Because right now I'm going off the normal, right? And as I add, you know, if I go one direction, I sort of lose on the other, right? So like an easy way to do this, or to kind of like fix this, if I go like this, right? If instead of going up and down, I use my slide, right? And then I click this arrow, because here it's basically tangent, right? But here I could kind of like move it out. So if I kind of do this, or like move it the other way, see? I used the knowledge that we sort of like talked about earlier today, so that I can find just the tangency of this corner, right? Because like we're sort of like working our way through. Now that we fixed that, now let's check for curvature. And then that curvature, all we had to do is move this one, probably off the normal, like that, and like that. So now we have a very nice surface that, you know, that the highlights, you know, go through. And then this was a nice like example of how moving these CVs around, and I'm using the geometry and my understanding of the alignment to, you know, develop these main forms. And obviously this was a bit of a quick one, you know, in the sense of just this quick, like, you know, a section of the video. But remember that inside of the studio, and just in any like project in general, we're, you know, especially surfaces like this, the main like body of the car, there's gonna be a lot of refinement, and there's gonna be a lot of checking to make sure that it is basically as perfect as you can get it. And obviously that's a long-term sort of project, right? But I wanted to kind of show you guys how I'm using the CV transform tool to find curvature, to clean my surfaces, you know, to make my relationships make more sense, and basically just in general, just CV massaging. So yeah, that's a very you know, basic like intro to curvature, to, you know, curvature combs, alignment. And I'm hoping that this video kind of demystified the process a little bit. And then now you guys can hopefully, you know, once you guys come across these sort of situations, you could slowly start to figure out how to solve those problems. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I know it's a super long one, but I wanted to make this very in-depth because I really felt like this is something that's very difficult to understand, and hopefully this really helped you guys out. And yeah, so thanks for watching, and hope I see you on maybe my next stream or my next video. But yeah, thanks for watching. Bye bye.